December 7th, 1941, the morning Pearl Harbor burned. Most Americans watched battleships sink beneath oily waters, their steel hulls torn open like paper. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto stood aboard the carrier Akagi, receiving reports of the attack's success. 8 battleships damaged or destroyed, nearly 2,400 Americans dead. The Japanese strike force had achieved tactical brilliance, yet Yamamoto's face betrayed no triumph. He turned to his staff officer and spoke words that would prove prophetic. "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant." What Yamamoto could not have known that December morning was that his greatest fear would materialize not in the form of aircraft carriers or battleships, but in something far more terrifying, silent, unseen predators that would transform the Pacific Ocean into a graveyard for Japanese shipping. The American submarine force, though small and plagued with faulty torpedoes, would become Japan's ultimate nightmare. In the weeks following Pearl Harbor, Commander Dudley Morton stood on the bridge of USS Wahoo, watching the Pacific waters stretch endlessly before him. Morton, known to his crew as Mush, possessed an aggressive spirit that would redefine submarine warfare. Unlike the cautious tactics initially employed by American submarine commanders, Morton believed in attacking relentlessly, surfacing to chase targets and pressing attacks even under heavy depth-charge bombardment. The Japanese Empire had stretched itself across the Pacific like a vast net, capturing territory from Burma to the Solomon Islands. But this expansion created a critical vulnerability. Japan's island nation depended entirely on maritime trade. Every barrel of oil, every ton of rubber, every grain of rice needed by the war machine had to travel by ship. The Japanese merchant marine comprised approximately 6 million tons of shipping at the war's start, a fleet that would need to sustain an empire. Lieutenant Commander Richard O'Kane, serving as Morton's executive officer aboard Wahoo, understood the strategic implications better than most. O'Kane meticulously studied Japanese shipping routes, analyzing patterns and predicting convoy movements. He recognized that Japan's industrial heartland could be strangled not through massive fleet engagements, but through systematic destruction of its merchant vessels. According to historical analyses, documented in Silent Victory, the U.S. Submarine War Against Japan by Clay Blair, the American submarine force began the war with merely 51 operational submarines in the Pacific, many of them obsolete S-class boats from the First World War era. The newer fleet, submarines, Kato, and Balao-class vessels represented technological marvels, capable of diving to 400 feet and traveling over 10,000 miles without refueling. Yet technology alone could not guarantee success. The Mark 14 torpedo, the primary weapon of American submarines, suffered from catastrophic design flaws. Torpedoes ran deeper than set, magnetic exploders detonated prematurely or not at all, and contact exploders often failed upon striking targets. Submarine commanders watched in anguish as perfectly aimed torpedoes either passed harmlessly beneath the enemy. Commander Morton confronted these failures head-on during Wahoo's third patrol in January 1943. After firing torpedo after torpedo at Japanese vessels with minimal results, Morton surfaced Wahoo and attacked a convoy using the deck gun, a dangerous tactic that exposed his submarine to counterattack. His aggressive approach yielded results for Japanese ships sent to the bottom, but also highlighted the desperate measures commanders employed when their primary weapons failed them. March 19, 1943 marked a turning point in the submarine war, though few recognized it immediately. In the cold waters off the Japanese home islands, USS Trigger stalked a large enemy tanker. Commander Roy Benson had positioned his submarine perfectly. The target presented a textbook firing solution. 6 torpedoes leaped from Trigger's tubes, their propeller wakes drawing white lines through the dark water. Benson and his crew listened through the hydrophones, counting seconds until impact. The torpedoes struck the tanker's hull with audible clangs. Nothing happened. No explosions. No secondary detonations. The tanker sailed on, apparently unaware it had been attacked. Benson's rage echoed through Trigger's control room, a fury shared by submarine commanders throughout the Pacific. American submariners were dying while their weapons betrayed them. The Mark 14 torpedo crisis had roots stretching back to peacetime development. The Bureau of Ordnance, responsible for torpedo design, had conducted limited live-fire testing due to budget constraints. Each Mark the 14th cost $10,000, an enormous sum during the Great Depression, rather than expend precious test weapons. The Bureau relied on theoretical calculations and assumed their designs would perform as intended. Rear Admiral Charles Lockwood, Commander Submarines Pacific, inherited this disaster when he assumed command in February 1943. Lockwood, a submariner since the First World War, listened to his commander's complaints and believed them. Unlike his predecessor, who had defended the Bureau of Ordnance, Lockwood ordered systematic testing of the Mark 14's failures. Lieutenant Commander Lawson Ramage conducted the first definitive test in June 1943. Ramage fired torpedoes at submerged nets while varying depth settings. The results proved devastating to the Bureau's credibility. Torpedoes set to run at 10 feet actually ran at 25 feet. The magnetic influence exploder, designed to detonate beneath enemy ships where armor was weakest, triggered prematurely on the Earth's magnetic field variations, or failed to trigger at all. But even after disabling the magnetic exploder and correcting depth-keeping mechanisms, torpedoes still failed. Commander Reuben Whitaker of USS Tinosa experienced the ultimate frustration in July 1943 when he encountered the Japanese whale factory ship Tonin Maru No. 3, 19,000 tons, dead in the water, a perfect target. Whitaker fired 15 torpedoes. 11 struck the ship's hull. 2 exploded. Tonin Maru limped away, while Tinosa, having expended nearly all her torpedoes, could only watch. The problem, finally identified, lay in the contact exploder mechanism itself. The firing pin design caused the pin to crumple upon striking targets at perpendicular angles, the exact scenario submariners aimed for. Only glancing blows or very slow-moving torpedoes would detonate properly. The Bureau of Ordnance had created a weapon that worked best under the worst firing conditions. Admiral Lockwood bypassed official channels and authorized field modifications. Submarine tenders worked frantically to redesign firing pins using sturdier materials and simpler mechanisms. By September 1943, American submarines finally possessed reliable weapons. The impact on Japanese shipping would prove catastrophic. Commander Samuel Delhi took USS Harder on patrol in October 1943, armed with properly functioning torpedoes. In the waters around Borneo, Delhi intercepted a Japanese convoy and executed a textbook approach. His first torpedo struck a freighter amidships, the explosion breaking the ship's back. Harder's crew heard the dying vessel's bulkheads collapsing through their hull. Delhi pressed the attack, sinking 3 more vessels before dawn. The age of effective American submarine warfare had finally arrived. Meanwhile, Japanese naval architects struggled with their own crisis. Their merchant fleet, designed during peacetime, lacked adequate defensive measures. Most cargo vessels sailed at 12 to 14 knots, too slow to evade submarine attacks. Few possessed sonar equipment. Watertight compartmentalization remained primitive by Western standards. A single torpedo hit could doom an entire ship. Commander Toshimori Makino of the Imperial Japanese Navy's Convoy Escort Service recognized the mounting danger. Makino compiled reports from survivors documenting attack patterns and submarine tactics. His analysis revealed a terrifying truth. American submarines were becoming more aggressive, more skilled, more deadly with each passing month. November 18, 1943, USS Sculpin plunged toward crush depth as Japanese destroyers hammered the submarine with depth charges. Commander Fred Conaway ordered emergency surface procedures, but Sculpin had sustained fatal damage. The submarine broke the surface bow first, wallowing helplessly as Japanese destroyers closed in. Conaway gave the order to abandon ship, then went below to destroy classified materials. It was never seen again. The 42 survivors of Sculpin, including young ensign George Rochek, endured interrogation at Ofuna prison camp near Yokohama. The Japanese intelligence officers seemed particularly interested in submarine tactics, patrol areas, and communication procedures. Rochek and his crewmates provided only name, rank, and serial number. But their captors had already learned much from captured documents and observation of attack patterns. What the Japanese learned terrified their naval leadership. American submarines were no longer conducting cautious patrols. They operated in coordinated wolf packs, shared intelligence in real time, and attacked with suicidal aggression. The November 1943 sinking of the escort carrier, Kaio by USS Sailfish, demonstrated this new boldness, A submarine had successfully attacked and destroyed a warship once considered immune to undersea assault. Admiral Lockwood's strategic vision extended beyond simply sinking ships. He recognized that Japan's war economy depended on specific resources flowing from specific locations. Oil from Borneo and Sumatra, rubber from Malaya, iron ore from the Philippines, rice from Indochina. By positioning submarines along these critical sea lanes, Lockwood could interdict not just individual ships, but entire resource categories. Commander Eugene Fluckey, taking USS Barb on her first war patrol under his command in March 1944, embodied this aggressive new philosophy. Fluckey studied intelligence reports identifying priority target tankers above all else. Without oil, Japanese warships became floating museums. Without aviation fuel, the Zero fighters defending the Empire would sit grounded. Without diesel, the trucks hauling munitions would stand idle. Fluckey found his targets in the South China Sea. On March 31st, 1944, Barb encountered a convoy of tankers escorted by destroyers. Rather than making a cautious approach, Fluckey drove directly into the convoy formation at flank speed, firing torpedoes from multiple angles. The resulting chaos destroyed 3 tankers and scattered the convoy. Barb escaped in the confusion, having delivered a crippling blow to Japan's fuel supply. The statistical evidence, documented in Joint Army-Navy Assessment Committee records, revealed the campaign's devastating effectiveness. In 1942, American submarines sank approximately 180 Japanese merchant ships, totaling roughly 600,000 tons. By 1943, those numbers had doubled. But 1944 would witness a massacre. American submarines would send over 600 Japanese vessels to the ocean floor, totaling nearly 3 million tons of shipping. Captain Takeshi Nato commanded the merchant vessel Tamatsu Maru, carrying aviation fuel from Borneo to Osaka. Nato had made this run 17 times since the war began. But by summer 1944, every voyage had become a nightmare. Submarines lurked everywhere. Convoys that once included 10 to 15 cargo ships now numbered 3 or 4. There simply weren't enough vessels remaining to form larger groups. Destroyer escorts, desperately needed for fleet operations, could rarely be spared for merchant protection. On June 14, 1944, NATO's fears materialized when USS Harder, under Commander Sam Delhi, intercepted Tamatsu Maru off Tawi-Tawi. Delhi had already sunk 2 destroyers earlier that day, and his aggressive tactics bordered on reckless. Harder surfaced 2,000 yards from the convoy, prompting NATO to order emergency evasive maneuvers. But Delhi had positioned perfectly. Harder's torpedoes caught Tamatsu Maru as she turned, igniting the aviation fuel cargo. The explosion could be seen for miles. July 7, 1944, brought Commander Delhi face-to-face with his final battle. USS Harder prowled the waters off Bataan, having already achieved legendary status by sinking 5 destroyers in a single patrol. The Japanese combined fleet had grown so concerned about Harder's activities that they organized a dedicated hunter-killer Group 6 destroyers under Captain Takeo Kurita's command, assigned specifically to find and destroy this one submarine. Kurita's flagship destroyer, Minazuki, established sonar contact with a submerged target. The ping pattern indicated a submarine, and Kurita knew from intelligence reports that only one American submarine operated so aggressively in these waters. He ordered a coordinated depth charge attack, with all 6 destroyers converging on Harder's position. Over 70 depth charges rained down, their explosions creating a maelstrom of concussive force. Harder never surfaced again. Sam Delhi and his entire crew, 60 men, perished that day. Yet Delhi's aggressive tactics had already revolutionized submarine warfare. His confirmed sinkings included 16 Japanese vessels totaling 54,000 tons. But his strategic impact far exceeded these numbers. Delhi had proven that submarines could hunt surface warships with devastating effect, forcing the Japanese Navy to divert precious destroyers from fleet operations to convoy escort duty. Meanwhile, Commander Richard O'Kane, now commanding USS Temps after his service aboard Wahoo, pushed submarine warfare to even greater extremes. O'Kane possessed an almost supernatural ability to position Temps perfectly for attacks. His crew had developed such confidence in their captain that they would follow him into situations other submarine commanders would consider suicidal. On June 24, 1944, Tang encountered a convoy off the coast of Japan itself, 5 cargo ships escorted by destroyers. Rather than making a submerged approach, O'Kane surfaced Tang at night and raced ahead of the convoy at flank speed, using darkness as cover. When Tang reached the optimal position, O'Kane submerged and waited. The convoy sailed directly into his ambush. 5 torpedoes, 5 ships sunk. Tang escaped before the escorts could organize a counterattack. But O'Kane's most audacious action occurred in the Formosa Strait during October 1944. Thames intercepted a heavily escorted convoy carrying troops and supplies to reinforce Japanese positions in the Philippines. Over 4 consecutive nights, O'Kane attacked this convoy repeatedly, sinking 10 ships. The Japanese escorts pursued Thames relentlessly, dropping over 200 depth charges, yet O'Kane evaded every attack through brilliant ship handling and intimate knowledge of ocean thermal layers that deflected sonar. Tang's 5th patrol ended in tragedy. On October 25, 1944, while attacking another convoy, one of Tang's torpedoes malfunctioned after leaving the tube. The torpedo circled back toward its launcher, a nightmare scenario every submariner feared. O'Kane ordered emergency maneuvers, but the torpedo struck Tang's stern, exploding beneath the engine room. Tang sank in seconds. Only 9 men escaped the sinking submarine, including O'Kane. They spent hours in the water before Japanese escorts rescued them. O'Kane would spend the remainder of the war as a prisoner, subjected to brutal interrogations and torture. Yet even in captivity, O'Kane maintained his defiant spirit, refusing to provide intelligence beyond basic personal information. The Japanese merchant marine's destruction accelerated through late 1944. Commander Reuben Whitaker, commanding USS Flasher, sank 21 Japanese ships totaling over 100,000 tons, a record that would stand through the war's end. Commander Eugene Fluckey took Barb on increasingly audacious missions, including an attack on Japanese installations in the Kuriil Islands, where Barb actually shelled shore targets with her deck gun. Vice Admiral Takajiro Onishi, architect of the kamikaze strategy, understood that Japan's strategic position had become untenable. In private meetings with Imperial Navy staff officers, Onishi presented statistics that painted a grim picture. Japanese merchant tonnage had fallen below 3 million tons, half the war starting point. Oil imports from the southern territories had dropped to 20% of 1942 levels. The empire's industrial production was collapsing not from American bombing but from resource starvation. January 15, 1945 found Commander George Street bringing USS Tarante into the cramped waters of the Korean Strait. Street, younger than most submarine commanders at 30 years old, had developed innovative tactics for attacking in shallow, heavily defended coastal areas. These waters, merely 200 feet deep in most places, offered submarines no room for deep diving to escape depth charge attacks. Most commanders avoided such dangerous patrol zones. Street sought them out. The Korean Strait served as a critical supply route for Japanese forces in Manchuria and Korea. Coastal shipping hugged the shoreline. Staying in water too shallow for conventional submarine approaches, Street positioned Tarante in a narrow channel during daylight hours, sitting on the bottom with all systems shut down to avoid detection. At night, Tarante would surface and race ahead of expected convoy routes. On January 20th, Street's patience paid off. A convoy of 4 cargo ships loaded with coal and iron ore appeared, escorted by 2 anti-submarine vessels. Street made his approach on the surface in darkness, closed to 1,200 yards point-blank range in submarine warfare, and fired 6 torpedoes. All 6 struck home. The explosions lit up the night sky, and Street crash-dived Tarante before the escorts could react. The depth charge attack that followed tested Tarante's structural integrity to its limits. 57 depth charges exploded around the submarine over 3 hours. Light bulbs shattered. Cork insulation rained from the overhead. Men held onto handrails as the submarine bucked from near-miss concussions. Yet Tarante's hull held, and Street eventually crept away using thermal layers to mask his submarine's signature from Japanese sonar. Gilmore gave his final order, "Take her down." The crew obeyed, diving while their captain remained topside. Gilmore sacrificed himself to save his submarine and crew. September 2nd, 1945 brought Commander Richard O'Kane aboard the battleship USS Missouri, anchored in Tokyo Bay. O'Kane, recently liberated from Omori prison camp, weighed barely 100 pounds, his body ravaged by malnutrition and torture. Yet O'Kane insisted on attending the surrender ceremony. Standing among the assembled officers, O'Kane watched Japanese Foreign Minister Mamoru Shigemitsu sign the instrument of surrender. Tang's captain had survived to witness victory. Admiral Chester Nimitz, addressing the assembled dignitaries, made specific mention of the submarine force's contribution. The Japanese underwent a form of blockade more complete than any in history. "My submarines contributed enormously to this result." Nimitz understood what many observers missed: the Pacific War had been won not through dramatic carrier battles or island invasions, but through systematic destruction of Japan's maritime lifelines. The submarine campaign's strategic effectiveness exceeded all pre-war expectations. American war planners had anticipated submarines would support fleet operations and conduct reconnaissance missions. No one predicted submarines would become the primary instrument of Japan's economic strangulation. Silent service had waged unrestricted submarine warfare with devastating effect. Severing the connections between Japan's home islands and conquered territories, Japanese historians later analyzed why their nation had been so vulnerable to submarine attack. Captain Atsushio, in his post-war memoir, Why Japan's Anti-Submarine Warfare Failed, identified several critical factors. Japan had never developed adequate convoy protection systems, preferring to concentrate resources on offensive operations. Japanese anti-submarine technology lagged behind Allied developments in sonar and radar. Most critically, Japanese naval doctrine focused on decisive fleet engagement rather than protecting commercial shipping. The human stories behind the statistics proved even more compelling. Commander Samuel Dealey's widow, Edwina, accepted her husband's Medal of Honor posthumously, joining a sorrowful sisterhood of submarine widows. These women had sent their husbands to war knowing the odds. Submarines either returned from patrol or were posted as overdue, presumed lost. No wounded submariners came home because submarine warfare offered no middle ground between survival and death. Lieutenant Commander Eugene Fluckey, having survived the war, continued his naval career, eventually reaching the rank of Rear Admiral. Fluckey wrote extensively about submarine tactics, emphasizing the importance of aggressive action and creative thinking. His memoir, Thunder Below, became required reading for submarine officers, teaching new generations the lessons learned in desperate combat beneath Pacific waters. Commander Dudley Morton's body was never recovered. Oahu rests today in approximately 200 feet of water in the Leperos Strait. Japanese patrol records indicate Oahu was attacked by aircraft on October 11, 1943, and sank with all hands 80 crew members. Morton's aggressive spirit and innovative tactics influenced every submarine commander who followed. His legacy lived on in the officers he trained and the tactics he pioneered. The Japanese perspective on submarine warfare revealed profound respect mixed with resentment. Post-war interviews with Japanese merchant seamen revealed universal fear of American submarines. Captain Takeshi Nato, who survived 3 separate torpedo attacks, described the psychological impact. "We sailed knowing death lurked beneath every wave. The Americans could strike without warning, from any direction, at any time. This constant terror wore us down more than the actual attacks." The broader strategic implications reshaped post-war naval doctrine worldwide. Every major navy recognized submarines as capital ships capable of independent strategic operations. The Soviet Union, observing American submarine success against Japan, invested heavily in submarine technology during the Cold War. Modern nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines trace their doctrinal lineage directly to the American submarine campaign against Japan. Admiral Lockwood retired from active service in 1947, but remained involved with submarine affairs until his death in 1967. Lockwood wrote several books about submarine warfare, including Sink 'Em All, which became the definitive insider's account of the campaign. Lockwood emphasized that submarine warfare's effectiveness stemmed not from technology alone, but from the courage and skill of the men who served aboard those steel tubes. The final assessment of why Japanese feared American submarines more than anything else rests on multiple factors. Submarines represented an invisible threat that could strike anywhere, any time. Unlike aircraft that could be seen approaching or surface ships that appeared on the horizon, submarines attacked without warning. The psychological impact proved as devastating as the physical destruction. Japanese merchant seamen, knowing they sailed toward probable death, lost the will to fight. Captains refused orders to sail. Crews deserted. The merchant marine, Japan's strategic lifeline, collapsed not from complete annihilation, but from pervasive terror. Today, memorials honor the 52 American submarines lost during the Pacific War. At Pearl Harbor, the USS Bowfin Submarine Museum preserves one of these vessels, allowing visitors to experience the cramped conditions submariners endured. The names of lost submarines appear on memorial walls: Albacore, Amberjack, Argonaut, Barbel, and 48, others each name representing approximately 60 men who never came home. These silent warriors achieved strategic victory through courage, sacrifice, and relentless aggression. Their campaigns strangled an empire and helped end history's most destructive war. The Japanese feared American submarines above all else because submarines proved unstoppable silent hunters that transformed the Pacific Ocean into a graveyard for Japanese ambitions.